I pay homage to the Buddha, I pay homage to the Dhamma, I pay homage to the Sangha. So with Thanksgiving on the way, I feel a little bad about not having a Thanksgiving-themed talk about maybe, moderation. Especially on my part. I'm a big fan of pie and, mashed potatoes, the whole thing. So it would be just as much for me as it would be for you guys, but maybe more so. What I want to talk about today is harmonious relationships, or maybe harmonious friendships. In thinking about this talk, I was thinking about it as relationships, but a lot of people understand relationships to be romantic, let's say. And the benefit of talking about friendships is that friendships can apply to anyone, because our family can be our friends, our spouses or significant others can be our friends, and so on. Strangers can be our friends. So it might be helpful to look at harmonious friendships. This topic came to mind last month when I gave a talk on what happens when we stop meditating. And in that one I was talking about a period of about 3 years of my life where I stopped having a daily practice, and I stopped meditating and stopped attempting to follow the precepts. And one of the things that happened as I came back to Buddhism, in fact with a force, and actually considering myself Buddhist and wanting to take the precepts, wanting to take refuge, was that there were some friendships that had to fall away, let's say, that that had to dissolve, and in some cases I had to say goodbye to some people. And there was a question from someone afterward asking, well, in those cases, how do you not hurt the other person by having to say goodbye, or how do you how do you do something like that skillfully so that you don't cause harm? And of course, in cases like that, we have to remember that kamma, or karma, is based in intention. Are we intending to hurt someone by saying goodbye, or are we intending to help ourselves heal and hopefully let them heal by saying goodbye? And so I'll get back to that a little later in the talk, because that for me is something that is a very extreme case. We shouldn't have to always say goodbye. In fact, we should be trying to promote good friendships in our lives of various sorts. The first kind that I would like to talk about is one that comes out of Buddhism itself, which is the Kalyana Mittata, which is the spiritual friend, right? We sometimes talk about, say, Dharma friends in the Mahayana tradition. Well, in the Theravada tradition, it's Kalyana Mittata, right? And that's the spiritual friend who, in most cases, I think out of the Pali Canon, is meant to be someone who's more like a teacher, but it does extend to many kinds of friendships that are beneficial to the practice. And one example of that comes out of the my printer cut this off a little bit. So this is Digha Janu Sutta, out of the Book of Eights in the Anguttara Nikaya. And I'll read this for you guys right now. And what is meant by admirable friendship? There is the case where a layperson, in whatever town or village he may dwell, spends time with householders or householders' sons, young or old, who is advanced in virtue. He talks with them, engages them in discussions. He emulates consummate conviction in those who are consummate in conviction, consummate in virtue in those who are consummate in virtue, consummate in generosity in those who are consummate in generosity, and consummate discernment in those who are consummate in discernment. This is called admirable friendship. When I first read that, I had to look up what consummate meant in that context, because it looks like consummate, which means something very different. And consummate in this sense means perfected, to have mastered something. So in this case, we're advised to seek out friends who have perfected their virtue, who have perfected their conviction, perfected their generosity, perfected their discernment, or wisdom, let's say, or insight. And in my own case, that's not something that I was doing in a Buddhist context. I think I spoke about this in my last talk as sort of a lone wolf type who was very nervous about calling himself a Buddhist and seeking out community in Buddhism. So I was trying to learn on my own, mostly through books and Dhamma talks I could find online. But the people in my life were not Buddhist and were not necessarily religious of one kind or another. And so that isn't to say that that's necessary for someone to have, because I still found the path anyway, and I still was practicing. But I didn't have teachings like that to make it a case to seek out virtuous people and to try to be virtuous myself. If anything, in my friendships, I was so concerned with being liked by others that I would often, I would think, be someone without strong integrity, where I would make the choice to, say, not eat meat, and then someone would offer me meat, and then I'd go ahead and eat it. And that's an extreme example. For most people, it's usually something a little more mild than that, like you decide to make the effort to be skillful in speech, to avoid false speech, malicious speech, harsh speech, and gossip. And then you have friends who just love to dish on people, right? They just love gossip. And the skillful thing to do in those contexts is to try to steer the conversation away, or to remain silent, or perhaps even walk away from conversations like that. But if you want to be liked better than you want to be, say, skillful or moral or virtuous, you might just fall right in and gossip with them, or be malicious or harsh with them. And I had cases like that in my own life, where I had friends who would spend a lot of their time sitting around a table and gossiping and speaking very ill of others. And I would either stick around and hear all of that, or play into it myself. And these people would also smoke cigarettes, and I was a social cigarette smoker. I would smoke with them, and they were drinkers, and I would drink socially with them. And those kind of activities, from the most subtle aspect of, say, gossip, to the more severe on the body, like drinking and smoking, have an effect on the practice. So even if I, say, wasn't smoking or drinking, but I was, say, gossiping, or participating in idle chatter with people, I would walk away with it with a bit of a heaviness in my body. In retrospect, I can see how those type of things stick with you. And so you sit down to meditate, and all of these conversations pop up, because in Vipassana, which is the meditation style that I do, you have an object of meditation. In my case, it's the breath, and you focus on that, and you return to that, and you let it anchor you, or rather you use it to anchor you to the present moment. All the while, various things are happening in the body and the mind. And past conversations are something that come back. And if you're living a blameless life, a skillful life, the way the Buddha encourages us, then when you sit down, mostly pleasant things should come up. Times you've been generous, times you've been kind, times you've been friendly, compassionate. What might happen, as it was my case, you sit down, and what comes back is the time you said this to someone in a harsh tone, the time you gossiped about someone and that person found out. That's happened before. I'm sure that's happened to many people who have fallen into that trap of gossip, where you think you're confiding in someone who won't say anything, and they go, "Oh yeah, of course, he's just like that. And then they walk away and then call that person and say, hey, you won't believe it. So-and-so just said this about you. And then they return. And in my early 20s, I had instances like that where I said some things that I shouldn't have said. And I said it mostly to get the other person to stop. I can even remember the situation. I was at a restaurant and I had a friend asking for gossip, just asking for me to say something mean about someone. And I kept demurring, just, I'm not, I won't say anything like that. And I was trying to return to my meal, and then he kept asking and asking and asking and asking, and my conviction was weak. So in that moment, I just blurted out, and I said something very, very harsh about the person. It was something I believed. I wasn't lying, but it was the kind of thing that didn't need to be said. And I went ahead and said it, and thinking, okay, that's what that person wanted to hear. I can return to my meal. It was at Zanku. They have really good chicken. And a week later, it all blew up in my face, where the person found out, was very hurt, had told others, and it just became this big mess. So in a situation like that, who's at fault? The person who sat across from me asking for all this gossip, or me who provided it, or the both of us? How might harmonious relationships or friendships, how might the seeking of virtuous people to associate with have helped in that context? Maybe if I had had more conviction in being virtuous and being moral, I might not have actually gone through with saying anything. I might have asked the person to stop talking this way because it had made me extremely uncomfortable. There are other things I could have done other than wanting to be liked by that person or wanting to silence them to end an awkward situation. Because we never know how the return comes. The other part of kamma, right, is vipaka. We never know how that's going to affect us. It might happen 10 years from now, but in my case, it happened a week later. We never know. Now, part of looking for skillful friends is looking for those who are in the, I would say, within the monastic life, because that's something I didn't have before. People who have taken those vows are often meant to be examples of what the Buddha had preached, right? They're still human, but they have more opportunities to practice. They have more opportunities to live in optimal situations to attain enlightenment, to attain nibbana. And that's one of the reasons why the Buddha talks about these type of friendships as the whole of the holy life, the entirety of the holy life. So this comes out of the Samyutta Nikaya, out of the Upada Sutta. Or rather, this is Upada Sutta out of the Samyutta Nikaya, sorry. And the Buddha's talking to Ananda, and he says, this is the entire holy life, Ananda. That is good friendship, good companionship, and good comradeship. When a bhikkhu has a good friend, a good companion, a good comrade, it is to be expected that he will develop and cultivate the Noble Eightfold Path. And one of the good things about being in community is that we have more opportunities to meet people like that. We have more opportunities to meet bhikkhus and bhikkhunis and upasakas and upasikas. We have more opportunities to meet people and associate with people who are also following the Eightfold Path, who can give us examples of how to live the Eightfold Path. And I definitely needed examples. I didn't know I needed examples. In fact, I thought I was doing just fine and wondering how these things kept happening to me. All of these bad experiences kept happening to me. How friendships would turn so sour, how there was so much tension in my life. Because I was a meditator. I wasn't someone following the entirety of the path. And when we look for our associates in life, when we look for companions in life, it is maybe beneficial to look for those who are also working on these things, because then we can support each other. Because then, if you're speaking to someone who is also working on skillful speech, you can point out to each other when you fall short, rather than have someone who encourages unskillful speech, who encourages unskillful thought. Now, many of us have friends who are not following the path, myself included. And the message is not then to disassociate with people like that, but to be mindful of our associations the same way we're mindful of the body, of the breath, of the mind. The same way we are mindful of our thoughts, our words, and our actions. Because being conditioned beings, being interconnected beings, that's a part of skillful thought, word, and action. That is a part of sila, or conduct. Because it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It doesn't only happen in the mind or the body. It happens as we interact with others. So we need to be fully present in our relationships with others. That is a part of the practice. That is a part of the middle way. That's what we're cultivating. That's what we're trying to succeed at. To create harmony, to create bliss, to create peace, to ease suffering as much as we possibly can. And it starts with us, right? We're also one of our friends, right? We should try to be friendly with ourselves. When we talk about the Brahma Viharas, we often start with ourselves. When we talk about metta, loving kindness, we start with ourselves. I've noticed that we sometimes are more compassionate and understanding, more forgiving of others than ourselves. We forget that we need to turn inward and look at the ways that we've been unskillful, look at the ways we've caused suffering in ourselves and others, and start with forgiving, start with compassionate feelings. We always start where we are in the practice, and that's not only at the beginning, but at the middle and at the end. Every day we're in this present moment right here. We're starting right here, and we have to forgive ourselves right here. I find this helpful because I don't always feel like I have been a good person. I don't sit up here or have any desire to sit up here to pretend as if I've been a good person, telling others how to be good. If anything, I had the bumpy road of Buddhism and can point out, hey guys, this is what happens when you really mess up and lose a bunch of your friends and have a bunch of people hate you and you show up 6 a.m. from drinking. And I give those lessons to say, hey guys, don't do those things. Not a good idea, right? And I had to learn the hard way, because I think even if I had shown up to a place like this, it might have made me a little uncomfortable to hear talks like this, because it would sound to me, maybe, and maybe to some of you as well, too much like, in my case, a Catholic upbringing, where, you know, no, don't associate with those kind of people or these kind of people, only with these, and, you know, if you're good, this will happen to you, and if you're bad, this will happen to you, and if we're not careful in our understanding of Buddhism, we might also have that same kickback, that same reaction that we had to maybe other religions we had when we were younger. It's not so much that something is good or bad, right, wrong, you know, evil. It's that when we live our lives a certain way, there's a level of peace there. In the case of the Eightfold Path, when we really start applying it to our lives, we see immediate results. When we decide to not gossip, we realize that people stop coming to us wanting to gossip. If you are in those situations where someone is gossiping or desiring you to talk negatively about someone, and you simply ignore that type of talk, they will get bored and they won't want to talk to you anymore. If you pretend to be interested because you don't want to lose a friend, they will think you're interested. They think they have an audience, which is, in those cases, often what they want. And they will continue, and you will continue, and so it goes. But if you can hold your resolve, if you can truly dedicate yourself to skillful practice, then oftentimes what I have found is that you stop getting the invites to, say, go to Vegas for the weekend, you know. All the friends you met at Burning Man maybe aren't your friends anymore, and that's okay, you know. And people who maybe talk negatively will talk a little negatively in front of you, because now, after enough time of living that way, you start becoming an example to others. See, when we read these examples of what a good friend is, someone who's virtuous, we're not only seeking those friends, we're endeavoring to be that kind of friend. As I said earlier, to ourselves, but also to others. We can be examples to others in at least what it means to apply effort to be a better person, to apply effort to be a kinder person. Even if we fall short, people can see that we are trying. And of course, that's the whole point. Kamma is intention. What matters is that we try to alleviate suffering, not necessarily that we succeed in alleviating it. So, we have that opportunity in every moment to try our best, to have right intention, to study our minds and see what it is that we're trying to do, and to see what the results of those efforts are. In the time that I've come back to Buddhism, I have attempted to change every aspect of my life, to live in accordance with the middle way, to live in accordance with the Eightfold Path, because that's the path I'm walking on now. And I have seen good results come of it. It's not that my life is perfect. There are always things that still come up, various complications, even hurt feelings amongst friends who were used to someone different, someone that I was during those 3 years, that I'm not now. In some cases, those friendships have completely dissolved, and it's very sad because I'll likely never see those people again. Other relationships have changed, partially because I've been willing to continue the friendship under a different context. And we can all do that. A friend invites you to a place where it might be very easy to slip up and be unskillful. You might recommend something else. If a friend wants to go to a bar to talk, and you don't want to drink because you're living the 5 precepts, say, you know, I'd love to go hang out with you. Let's go to Soup Plantation. I guarantee you, no one's gotten up to some bad business in Soup Plantation. The most you'll do is eat too much clam chowder and it'll be fine, right? We should definitely have friends in every aspect of life, wherever we go, regardless of what path they're on. And maybe that's important to talk about, especially as we get closer to Thanksgiving, because some of those friendships, I said again, are familial. They're our family. And there are all kinds of people we share bread with, we break bread with. And they might have all sorts of thoughts about all sorts of things. And we might be tempted, if we've been following the path for a while and seeing success, to moralize a little bit and philosophize and offer advice. And that can be a very dangerous thing as well. Because generally, people don't like getting advice they didn't ask for. And that, in its own way, can be something very unskillful. So in those situations when, say, at Thanksgiving, we're sitting at the table with various people of various beliefs and, you know, levels of morality, the best thing to do is be friendly, be kind, be compassionate. and maybe be silent. If someone asks you, hey, what have you been up to lately? Be honest. Like, you look a little happier. Oh, well, this is why, right? If they have more questions, great. If they look at you in a very confused way as if they don't understand, that's fine too. This is something I've gotten very used to in my own family, because I have, as I said before, a Catholic family, but sort of, because they're Hispanic, kind of like an ethnically Catholic. Some actually practice, and others are they just have crosses up on the wall, and that's about it. They don't really think about it much more than that. But because they don't think much more than that about it, any other religion, any other path, any other philosophy that might be out there is still very confusing and very foreign to them. And so when I pass up on the beer, sometimes I get a question. And since I have a large family, I get the same question a lot of times. And I could go into it, well, because I'm Buddhist, there's the 5 precepts, and generally we avoid alcohol, most abstain entirely. I don't need to get into that. I can just say, I don't know, thanks, I don't want it. Coca-Cola tastes better, or whatever drink it might be, Gatorade, water, tea. Tea is great. And most of the time people won't really press you on it. Some Buddhists are vegetarian. That can be a real big issue at Thanksgiving. Come on, man, turkey. I know. It's okay. There's also mashed potatoes. Those are great, with gravy and the whole thing. Assuming there's no turkey in the gravy. We can be in those situations and be friendly without causing any awkwardness. Awkwardness might come up anyway, and that's okay too. And when we make new friends, and they want to go out drinking, or they want to smoke, right? California, people are only smoking cigarettes, and that can be very common in a lot of places now. You can smell it in the air. And there's nothing wrong with people doing that. I mean, whether or not we think it's skillful, that's not really important to worry about. We're always focusing on our own ethics, our own morality, our own path. And when we abstain from those things, those are choices we are making for ourselves. And we can make the choice to be in those areas where those things are happening or not, and how to skillfully move around any obstacles that might appear. If you're a big music fan, you might decide to go to a concert. A lot of concerts can be very rowdy. Not only is the music loud, which is a good thing if you want to hear the music, but there's a lot of movement, and there's a lot of drinking, and there's a lot of smoking. How can we be in situations like that and still be on the path? We can, but our resolve has to be strong enough. If we're keeping the precepts, to continue keeping them. If we're following the path, to continue following it. So parameters of friendships often change anyway for many different reasons, not only, say, religious or philosophical reasons. And that's a part of good friendships, constantly communicating with each other. And you'll find that friends, even if they don't agree with you, if they're the right kind of friends, will be absolutely supportive. My best friend is probably the biggest skeptic and atheist I know, to the extent where he doesn't really think religion should exist in any form. Buddhism may be included, because it depends on whether or not people consider Buddhism to be a religion, which is a whole other topic unto itself. And yet somehow the friendship works, because he can see that this is something that matters to me, that is important to me. He can see the changes, the beneficial ones, And so when I first started giving talks, he was here. My very first talk, he sat over there and was very proud and very happy. And when I started following the path again and made the choice not to drink, he stopped offering. And when I decided to change the way I talked about things, we changed the subject. And so there's the perfect example of someone who, although is on a very different path, with a very different, say, list of priorities and different a conception of morality, being able to be supportive. And really, I think that's what we're all looking for in life out of our friendships, is support, love, acceptance. And those are things that we can also offer others, whatever path they might be on, whatever lives they're living. We can be that to them as well, some kind of support. So I think that's all I have there. I hope that everyone who goes on to Thanksgiving and enjoys all their food, their family, their friends, maybe keeps some of this stuff in mind about the precepts and the Eightfold Path. And I'll try to avoid eating as much pie as I usually do, and try to be kinder to those who maybe aren't so kind. And I think that's what I can offer. That's what I'll try to do, and it seems to be working so far.